Social media land, this is Ted Victor, founder of the Broward Social Network. Today is Thursday, June the 25th at approximately 6:41 in the evening. We have notable prominent attorney with us, Mr. Samuel Yeboah, and we're going to talk with attorney Yeboah about several things, including community and cop relations. Mr. Yeboah, Mr. Samuel Yeboah, welcome to the Broward Social Network.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here.
Introduce yourself. Thank you very much for giving us your most valuable asset, which is your time. And this video will be seen by hundreds and possibly thousands of viewers and participants of the Broward Social Network. And I'd like for this platform to get to know you. But more importantly, I'd like for us to discuss some of the current events which are affecting really all of the world, all of segments of the United States, however, particularly individuals who look like you and I. Yes. So first and foremost, just quickly introduce yourself professionally to the platform in terms of what you do, what is your specialty, and then we'll talk about how you became an attorney, and then we'll move on to current events.
All right, thank you. Yeah, I'm Samuel Yeboah. I'm an attorney here in Broward County. My office practices in the Tri-County area, which is Broward, Dade County, and also Palm Beach. My primary office is in Broward. I specialize in the areas of personal injury, medical malpractice, wrongful death, motor vehicle accidents, catastrophic injuries. We also do complex business litigation, and we handle also some discrimination cases, depending on what type of case it is. So I've been practicing in Broward County or in South Florida since 2003. I started my practice initially in North Carolina, which is where I grew up. I don't practice in North Carolina now, I'm primarily here in South Florida, but that's my background.
Well, thank you again. We're definitely will be talking about discrimination. And before we talk about current events, what brought you to law? I'm sure you have a wonderful brain. You could have been a surgeon. You could have been a dentist. What brought you to law?
Yeah, it might have been smarter if I had become a surgeon. With that being said, in high school, I played sports, but I was also on a debate team. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we did is we traveled and we gave, what I did was called Lincoln Douglas debate, which is one-on-one debate. You got an opportunity to match wits with, typically worthy opponents. I did very well in that. I actually made it to nationals when I was in high school. And I kind of got the bug to be able to get in front of people and give speeches. So it seems like the law was a natural fit. So that's kind of how I got on that journey to becoming an attorney. Now, once I was in college, the friends that I had in college, pretty much specialized in three different things. It was either most of us went to law school, went to medical school, or went to business school. So it's just business. Law seemed like a natural fit for me. So that's kind of how that came about.
Awesome. Well, having said that, Mr. Yeboah, I view you as a protector of the community, along with law enforcement officers. However, in 2020, this is a very memorable moment in America, throughout the world. And I would like to be able to understand from your perspective professionally, how we got to where we are and how is it that we as a community can better handle interactions with law enforcement. And I would like to know what's in my rights, what's not in my rights. And I will have a conversation, and some of them may be personal, along the lines of, have you ever been profiled in America? Because even though you're from a different part of the world, I'm from Latin America, we can easily pass for brothers. There's no doubt about it. And so the world cannot really see your credentials walking down the street, right? So I'd like for us to be able to just talk about this important, but still an uncomfortable conversation for me still. As a father, as an educator, I'm just not really understanding as to how we even got to where we are. So I'm going to share with you a clip, and then I'd like to have your feedback on it. And then I'd like for you to share with us, the public who will see this video along with my students, as to what an individual can and cannot do when it comes to police interactions. Okay, bear with me. Are you able to see that?
Yes, I can.
All right, so.
I couldn't help, I noticed you just sitting on the patio out there.
Are you able to hear that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you.
What's that? I couldn't help but notice you sitting on the patio behind this building.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's signs for no trespassing, private property,
here.
that kind of thing. Yeah, I wasn't sure what you were doing, if you lived here or you worked here.
Yeah,
it looks like you're working, doing something, picking stuff up.
I work here.
Okay, gotcha. What's the actual address then?
3333 Arapahoe.
Okay, what unit are you in?
I don't think I have to actually tell you that.
Well, I'm just checking to make sure that you have a right to be here, that's
Well,
all.
I just told you I lived here.
Okay.
And I told you that I'm working as well.
Okay.
Shouldn't that be enough for you?
Well, I gotta verify it, just so I know that you do in fact live here.
Kidding me? What do you need from me?
If you have an ID with your address on it, that'd be great.
Fucking unbelievable, man.
Well, we've had some stuff going on in this area. I'm just doing my job, just making sure you belong here, and if you do, then great, and I'll be on my way. Okay. Do you have anything with your address on it?
Yo, look, man, here, why don't you follow
Just
me
relax.
and I'll just fucking beep the building, dude.
Just chill out, man.
Dude, this is ridiculous.
I'm just asking you if you have something with your address on it, then that would help me.
No, I don't. How am I supposed to have something with my address on it?
Well, a lot of people have a driver's license.
They just carry something with their address on it?
Yeah, an ID.
It's ridiculous, bro.
Yeah. So, Mr. Atkinson, can I get your date of birth, please?
Why?
I just need to verify who you are, that you belong here, that you have a right to be here, okay?
Are you kidding me, man?
Can you have a seat, please?
No.
Mr. Atkinson.
No, I'm not.
290 code 12. Can you please have a seat?
No.
Put that down. Stop. Mr. Atkinson, right now you're obstructing a police officer, which is a jailable offense. I'm asking you one more time to sit down.
I'm not doing anything wrong. And you're not going to arrest me. You're not going to do anything. Because I live here. And I didn't do anything wrong.
Last chance, sir.
Well, what?
Have a seat.
Well, what? Well, what?
Sit down. Right now I'm detaining you and investigating you for a trespass.
I fucking live here, dumbass.
Sit down. Sit down.
No.
290.
That's what you are. You're a fucking
Have a seat, please.
You're gonna tase me outside of my residence? I hope that
Drop
thing's
that.
on.
Put that down.
I hope the camera's on, sir.
Put that down.
I really do. No, I'm working.
You need to listen to what I'm telling you to do right now.
I'm not doing anything. I'm not doing anything
290,
illegal.
we're on
I haven't done
the
anything
east
wrong.
side of
So I'm not gonna
2333
listen to you.
Folsom.
I don't
Subject's
know you.
failing to comply,
You're actually
not
on my
sitting down,
property,
and he
I
has
feel
some
unsafe.
kind of a blunt object in his hand.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna follow until my cover gets here. Have a seat.
I'm not sitting.
Sit down.
I'm not sitting anywhere.
Sit down. Now.
Why?
Now. Do it now.
Why? Why?
I'm detaining you to investigate.
What? For
Investigated
what?
trespass.
I live here.
You haven't confirmed that. Sit down.
I'm a student.
Sit down and I'll
I'm not
confirm it.
sitting anywhere.
Sit down now. Sit down.
I'm not sitting down.
Then you're probably going to get tased in a second.
Why?
Because you have a weapon. Put that down.
I have a weapon?
Put it down and comply with my orders.
That's not what you're doing, officer.
Do it.
Better thing, because I got fucking, dude, I could get lawyers And you have a camera on you.
It's filming right now.
Idiot.
Have a seat,
Why would you think that you could tase me? I'm freaking picking up trash on my property.
I need to confirm it.
Which is where I live.
There's a sign.
I'm not doing anything illegal, and you're not gonna fucking tase me, officer. So
Sit
how do you
down.
think about that?
Sit down.
How do you feel about that, sir?
Sit
How
down
do you feel about
now.
that, sir? And get your freaking lieutenant here. All
They're
right?
on the way.
Yeah, good. Jackass.
Sit down now.
Okay, a lot to talk about. Feedback, please, because we all know that that could have ended very differently.
Yes.
What's your feedback, please? Because I have lots of questions and I can talk to you for days about this. And as I watch it as a father and as a Black man in America, my heart is racing just watching it. Feedback.
Okay. I guess I've got two lanes of thought about what I just saw. One of them, obviously, the legal rights in terms of, what a person probably should or shouldn't do. And the other one is just what I think a person should do to make sure they make it home. Two very different lanes that we're traveling in. Because sometimes attempting to exercise your rights doesn't always mean that you'll make it home. So to me, that's the first thing that comes to mind. What is the smart course of action in a situation like that to make sure that you live later on to exercise those legal rights that you're trying to defend? If you don't survive an encounter because it's something that starts at a certain level, escalates to another level, and God forbid your family's being told later on that something happened and you're not around anymore. I just don't think that's how can I put it? Listen, as a Black man myself, I understand I've been through certain situations, so I get it. And a lot of times people evaluate what you're dealing with based on what's happening with you at the time. But it's not just what's happening with you at the time, it's the experiences that you bring to that moment. That might be the straw that broke the camel's back in some situations. But me personally, I would probably try to avoid dealing, using profanity and doing certain things in that situation, just because of what, you're still dealing with a human being, even if they're wrong, But again, I think it's better for you to make sure that you survive so you can get to hire a lawyer later on and, learn about your rights or even file suit if that becomes an appropriate path to take. So that's the first lane.
Okay, next lane.
The next lane is your legal rights, basically. Obviously, that's going to be impacted by what state you're in, potentially. A lot of states have similar statutes that track your, 42 USC 1983 rights under federal law, where basically, the long and the short of it is when a police officer stops you, they need to have some kind of probable cause to believe that you've done something illegal. That you're not simply just exercising rights that you have for them to detain you, so they have to have a reason to, then they have to confine you, you have to be conscious of that confinement, the fact that they've arrested or detained you in a particular way and that you didn't consent to that,
What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Explain, what do you mean by consent to that? We have a choice to consent or to not consent?
Well, if somebody's violating your rights and you bring to their attention that, hey, listen, you're violating my rights and I'm not okay with what you're doing, you're not, I'm trying to figure out the best, easiest example to give you. There's something called false imprisonment, for example, on the civil end. If you're detained by someone and you agree to that detention, that could potentially weaken whatever case you're going to bring, right? But if you basically say, hey, listen, I'm not okay with being detained, I want to be free to leave or to do whatever it is I'm supposed to be doing, and they violate your rights at that point, then yeah, you're being confined without your consent.
Okay, well, I want to be able to have this conversation for everyone to understand, because at some points my high school students will see this and there are layers to this video clip, right? It's a video clip that lasts about 20 minutes, and it was later found out that the officer did not have probable cause for approaching this gentleman. Based on what you saw, because it was about 4 minutes, based on what you saw, would this be considered resisting arrest?
Wow. You have to have a lawful basis for the detention to start with, for it to put it in that category. So I would argue that, if they didn't have a right to detain you to start with, I mean, a lot of times we see these charges for obstruction and resisting arrest or obstruction without violence. They have to have a reason to detain you or be conducting an investigation to start with. And if you don't have that, I would argue no.
So resisting arrest is based on the reason that they stopped you already, not the actual act in itself? Because my guess is somebody out there under different circumstances would have called that resisting arrest, and he would have ended up shot, dead.
Yeah,
this is a 26-year-old kid from Colorado. His name is Zaid Atkinson. And if I ever meet him, I'm going to give him several handshakes because he just was brazen. To stand up to the police officer, he was well within his right because he was on his property and he wasn't doing anything illegal. My guess is somebody else would have probably caved. And, the tone of the police officer, one of the many reasons why I needed to talk to you, to speak to an attorney, is the tone of like, sit down now. Is that something that I have to follow, even if I am breaking the law? I mean, I don't know. Is that something that I have to follow? Sit down now?
You mean even if you're breaking the law?
If I'm breaking the law and he tells me to sit down now, as opposed to just kind of arrest me, I'm trying to understand what gives him the right to speak to me that way, because I'm either breaking the law, and if I'm not breaking the law, he can or he shouldn't be speaking to me that way. I'd like to be able to know why. Is it because he's a police officer in itself? Does he have that authority?
Okay, I mean, I think I get what you're saying. Obviously, if you're doing something that's a violation of the law, and I'm just, trying to just talk in real day terms.
Right.
Some officers are not going to be polite when they deal with you.
Okay.
So they are an authority figure. So in essence, they have the right to detain you. They have the right to even use deadly force in certain situations. Most situations, I don't think, call for that. Right. But they certainly have the right to, put you in handcuffs, get physical if they need to arrest you in some situations. But I guess really what I would look at is whether or not they had the right to do that to start with. How they go about doing it, is more of an issue of, what type of police officers you're dealing with, what type of people skills that they have,
But with all due respect for your profession, I'm not comfortable with that answer, because that's too great for me. I need, you broke the law, you get arrested. You didn't break the law, you left alone. But I know in your world, it doesn't work that way, which is what drives me kind of insane, because I'm a scientist. I like to be able to just look at something objectively, test it, prove it. However, when it's just so gray, and I love the law. I mean, no offense to you, I love the law, but it just leaves. I want to know if I am suspected of doing something wrong and I'm not. I want to know if I can cuss him out and get away with it. I want to know, because I want to know what are my rights as a lay person walking down the street. I'm not doing anything wrong, such as this gentleman. I get irritated, I cuss him out, and then I'm saying, okay, well, and then he can say, okay, well, you weren't breaking the law before, but now that you cussed me out, now I can handcuff you and bring you in. Is that something, let's just say in Florida terms, because this is out of state, let's just say this is in Florida, because we're in Florida. Is that something that's permissible?
Yeah, I mean, I would argue if you're not breaking any law, then there's no reason that they should take you in, even if the officer don't like the way you're talking. I mean, you do have rights in this country. You have First Amendment rights, you have other rights to be able to express yourself. So if it's simply a matter of expression and they're taking you in because they don't like your attitude, I think that's inappropriate, period.
Okay. And so what would be, among many things we can discuss, what would be the repercussions for the officer? How would you handle that? How should I handle that? How should my students handle that? I'm being harassed by a police officer because I'm doing something that I know is not illegal, and then he gets pissed off and he chooses to arrest me. So let's just say I cooperate, I don't die, I cooperate. Then what are the recourses after that?
Well, you can certainly bring a lawsuit for false arrest. You can do it, like here in Florida, you can do it under state law, or you can do it under federal law. You can do it under both. We do have a couple of those cases that we're pursuing now, where someone was arrested for no reason. They were detained and taken into jail. And then basically we're, litigating the case to basically make sure to the city or the police department or to the officer themselves that that's just not okay behavior. You can't just go around taking people to jail for no reason. You have to have a reason.
When you go to court, okay, your client is arrested for whatever reason. Okay, let's just say that they are not doing anything illegal. They go to court, and then, does the officer then have to say to you, Mr. Yeboah, because he broke these laws, I have the right to arrest him? Does he have to show you why? Does he have to bring in evidence? Does he have to say, you know what, I heard that I got a call in the neighborhood that this bald-headed black guy with glasses and a blue shirt was robbing a bank. That was my reason. Does he have to bring in something to you in order to defend himself?
Well, he's going to have to do an affidavit. Some of this stuff is clearly more in the lane of a criminal attorney, because they deal with this a lot more frequently. That's really not my area per se. Typically, this is what we do. Let's say you get arrested and you've committed no law. You've broken no law. The officer still is going to have to write some kind of affidavit. He's going to do something that explains why he took the course of action that he did, in order for them to be able to pursue the case criminally. And then there's going to be a prosecutor who's going to look at that and decide whether or not there's a case there. They're going to make a filing decision to decide whether or not this is the facts under which the facts that were presented to the particular prosecutor. They're going to look at it and see if there was a violation of law that's sufficient, for them to be able to go in front of a jury and take it to the court and try to prosecute this case all the way through. Simply because an officer arrested someone doesn't necessarily mean that the prosecutor is going to pursue the case. I've seen situations where they no file on the case here in Florida.
And no record is kept on that person.
No, that's not necessarily accurate. It depends. You don't have a criminal conviction record, obviously, if the case is not filed on, but you're still going to have an arrest history. The fact that you got arrested is going to be recorded.
And that in itself can definitely impact your life, right? Your professional life, possibly.
Of course, and in particular, depending on what kind of job you have. Me, fortunately, I've worked for myself, so it's not like I'm being evaluated by someone else. But let's say you have a job that works with kids. You're trying to get a job with a nonprofit. They're going to look at things like that because you're being exposed to a very vulnerable population, and they want to make sure the people that they have working with the kids don't have certain issues. So yeah, there's going to be some things in your life that get affected. And anytime somebody runs a background check on you, they're going to see that arrest history. Unless it's something that, the arrest history, or if you get a conviction, obviously that's an issue in itself, or if it's dismissed, you still have that process. They're going to see that unless you go through a process called getting it expunged, basically going through a process and having it erased almost as if it wasn't there,
Okay, a couple of questions. And, I deal with high school students, and, these types of terminologies, we're probably going to have to flesh them out a little bit. But you did say that you're not a criminal attorney. However, as far as I'm concerned, Sam, this guy, Zaid Atkinson, that was a case of discrimination. He wasn't doing anything wrong. And had that happened here in Florida, he would probably have to come see you, because why? It was later found that there was no probable cause for him to interrogate him, because I'm not necessarily sure an officer has the right to say, okay, do you live here? And if you do, what apartment you live in? Is that something that's within his right?
I guess I'm trying to figure out the easiest way and the most careful way to answer it. A lot of times, some things are not black and white in the law. Let's say if the officer is relying on something they were told by someone else, for example, even if that was inaccurate, that may afford that officer some protection, from a lawsuit. Now, if the officer is simply being, unreasonable, they just saw you and they're asking you, hey, do you live here or whatever, I think that's completely inappropriate. That is something that obviously is going to cause an issue. And if obviously you get arrested for something like that, you're going to have a claim. So it kind of depends on the underlying facts. I mean, if you change different facts in a fact scenario, sometimes it can change the result because the law oftentimes isn't black and white in terms of the way it looks at things. It would be nice if it was, but it's not.
Right. So the kid gets arrested, find out that he was not doing anything wrong. The case gets dropped, and you said that it can be expunged. But that kid, let's just say Jade Atkinson, or let's just say Ted Victor, when Ted Victor is applying for a job, even though the case is expunged and the job says, have you ever been arrested, right? That could in itself be a red flag. I still have to reveal that, correct?
That's a good question. I've seen situations where the expungement may allow you, and again, every state's going to handle things a little bit different. There is no universal answer, even if most of the answer is going to be accurate. I have a case now in Atlanta, a case that we filed suit on in Atlanta, where the case was, didn't result in a conviction. And the judgment itself said that if you are in a situation where you're, basically you have the right to say that you were not convicted, for example, right? So if it's expunged, depending on what kind of application you're filling out, because I've seen some applications that still want you to record that stuff. Like if you're filling out a bar application, for example, they may want you to provide that information, whether it's been expunged or not, even if you're in a position to be able to answer that you have not been arrested before. You may still have to reveal that because the question itself may say, hey, with regard to expungements or whatever, let us know what's happened to you in the past so we can evaluate you to see if you have the good moral character to become an attorney in our state or something like that. Then you may have to reveal it. So it depends on the situation, but I think in most employment application situations, you should be comfortable being able to say that you probably that answering the question, no, let me just put it that way.
Okay, well, once again, I really appreciate your eloquence, your candor, but I'm going to be frank, and people are seeing this, hundreds and thousands of people are seeing this, but I'm just going to have to put it out there. Respectfully, Sam, I'm angry. I'm angry because I think based on the way my parents raised me, based on the way my community raised me, I've done everything right. I just like you've done everything right. And still somehow there's this perception out there's something I'm doing wrong. And the likelihood of me getting arrested is higher than somebody else in our population. How do you handle being a professional, particularly a representative of the law, and sometimes the perception of you? Was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday. Terry Gross was interviewing an attorney by the name of Brian Stevenson, who's also an author. He was in the courtroom, and the judge told him, get out. You can't be here without your attorney. And then he said, but I am the attorney. And then the judge laughed. How do you handle the perception and the reality versus the reality? And I know it's a loaded question. It's a loaded question.
That's exactly what I was thinking. It's difficult. I mean, obviously you bring whoever you are to whatever situation you're in life. How what's right for one person is not necessarily what's right for another. And even in my life, at different stages in my life, how I've handled, being harassed, because I've been harassed myself. So how do you handle that? And you got to think through the situation. Obviously, how I would handle it when I was, 18 or 19 is a little different than how I would handle it once I become an officer of the court myself. I'm an attorney. I have other considerations that I have as a professional in terms of things that it could cost me potentially, depending on whether or not I get irate and just completely, act like I may have done when I was 18, for example, because I mean, listen, I can understand the frustration. I can understand how someone may get angry being treated a certain way, especially when it's repeated. But what I always tell people that come to me and ask me about situations like that is, again, to the extent that you can be measured, because listen, some things you're going to be able to deal with after it's over. You're going to be able to file a lawsuit. You're going to be able to send that message that you want to send, you know? So for me, I guess it kind of depends, really. And it also depends on how bad the violation is. I mean, some things you're going to react to in a way that, you know, you may not react to, or you may not even think that you would react to, because of the circumstances and just what's going on with you that day. So, I mean, I don't have a one answer fits all type, I guess, answer that I could give. It just depends on the situation. But again, my thought for myself, or for, let's say, if I had a child that was out and in that situation, is I want to make sure he makes it home, or she makes it home, so she can tell me what happened, and then hopefully we can deal with it at that point as well. That doesn't.
Unfortunately, and pardon me for cutting you off, but unfortunately, making it home is not necessarily always on the person from the public. Making it home sometimes, you know, even when there's compliance, and we've seen that even when there's compliance, unfortunately, that citizen does not make it home, unfortunately. So that's the sad part about this reality. The other point is this, which I have, you know, my father has a law degree. He doesn't practice law. I'm old, and I still play with the idea of going to law school myself. However, it bothers me because you stated that get home and then you can actually file a suit. You can actually try to address what was done to you inappropriately. The time in law, for me, is way too slow for me to kind of sink my teeth into getting this officer who treated me bad. So that time frame is immeasurable, right? It could be a week, it could be months later after having been handcuffed unnecessarily, correct?
Unfortunately, the wheels of justice may turn even slower than what you described to me as far as months. Remember, whenever you're falsely arrested for something, the case has to have a particular resolution in the criminal court before you can even look at filing a civil suit. We get these calls all the time where people are actively involved in a case that has not been resolved yet. You know, I mean, you can't put the cart before the horse. I can't take the case and file suit on it now. So typically you're gonna either, you know, get a dismissal. Let's say if the state decides not to file on it, the prosecutor decides not to pursue the action, that puts you in that position. If the case is dismissed or thrown out by the judge for whatever reason, if you go through the process and get a not guilty verdict, you know, you have to have a positive resolution of the matter before then you can turn around and file a lawsuit, you know? So yeah, it can take a while to have the criminal case over with before you can even get to the civil stage. So
explain that a little bit more, just a little bit in lay terms, so that my high school students can understand that if you're wrongfully arrested, you have to be found innocent first, and then possibly try to retaliate or address the police officer who inappropriately arrested you?
I mean, not necessarily found innocent, but basically.
Or not guilty.
Yeah, I mean, the case either doesn't proceed with the prosecutor, they decide to end it there and not file on the case. You know, the case is dismissed at some point for whatever reason or thrown out of court, or you're found not guilty. Obviously, if you go through the process and you're found guilty, or you enter into a plea or something like that, that's almost a tacit admission of the fact that you did something wrong. You know, you can't then turn around and file suit, you know, because you have to be able to prove that they arrested you unlawfully, you did nothing wrong, and you basically, you know, need your day in court. So yeah, you have to have a resolution that does not involve a guilty plea, obviously, or being found guilty. It has to be something that's basically meaning the case is over and it was a positive resolution completely for you. That's kind of what you would need. So you got to have that first before then, you know, an attorney is going to take a look at that case and decide whether or not it's something they want to pursue civil.
Before I have two questions. At some point, I'm going to want you to give some advice to my young students, to my high schoolers, to my middle schoolers, as to how they should conduct themselves in order to avoid any escalation with the police at some point. However, the adult in the situation, or the law enforcer, is usually the police officer, right? So what would you say, considering the climate that we live in right now, considering that men have been lynched in 2020, what would you want police officers to keep in mind? Because I do believe that if they had better training on de-escalation, we could have fewer deaths. I also do believe that in some cases it may be expected, because an individual brings their world experience to the job. So if they were raised in a particular community that told them that I am somehow dangerous, possibly, that it is inevitable that they're going to see me and just assume that I'm up to no good. What would you want? Because at some point with my platform, I'd like to be able to talk to elected officials about better training for police officers. What would you add to that conversation as to how police officers should approach the community? Because this is not a sustainable model. I mean, people who look like me are dying way too often, and maybe more often than I realize, because now we have cell phones.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, I don't think this phenomenon is new. This is something that's been going on for years. Not, and when I'm saying years, I'm talking probably a couple of hundred years at least. If anything, I think society in some ways has evolved more, and you still see this. So imagine if people had cell phones, 60
Back
years.
then. Right.
It seems very frequent now, but if anything, I think, this is probably not as bad as it used to be. Doesn't mean that what goes on now is okay.
Right.
With regard to police officers, wow. I mean, that in itself is probably something that psychologists or different people need to assess, and just different people from different areas of the community need to take a look at in terms of what the potential answers are for the person who has the feelings that, hey, listen, this person that I'm in front of right now, because of whatever characteristic they have, whether it be race, which is oftentimes what you're looking at, is not worthy of my respect, or is not worthy of being treated the same way that I would treat someone that looks like me. I mean, how do you reach a person like that?
Right.
I don't know that I have the answer for that question. One of the things that I think is important, though, some of the things that are being bounced around in the Congress and being bounced around at different, state legislatures, in terms of, requiring police officers that are there when they know one officer is acting badly to intercede. I think that's important. That you have an obligation to do something. And
some sort of a check and balance in the community, some sort of a check and balance in the partners.
Yeah, in the police themselves, because you're asking me from the perspective of the police officers.
Right.
If other officers that are there have an obligation or a duty to step in whenever they see something going wrong, like, hey, you choked somebody long enough and they've passed out, there's no reason to choke them for another 2 or 3 minutes. Right. Then, and that there's going to be consequences if you don't act, and not just simply stand there and just, say, hey, that's just Bob, that's how he is.
So in the case of George Floyd, and again, pardon me for interrupting, in the case of George Floyd, ideally, the 3 other officers should have intervened.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. This man is handcuffed. And from what I saw, he was not resisting or causing any trouble in any way from what I saw.
Right.
I mean, you took him to the side, he sat down quietly, then you walked him back around to where the car was. Next thing you know, he's on the ground, and you feel a need to have your knee in his neck for, 8 minutes? 2 minutes after they tell you that, hey, this guy's not breathing, you still have your knee in his neck? I mean, there's just, the officers there should have done something. So I think that's one of the things. You want to put the onus on the police to police themselves to a certain extent. I think
Very
that's
good. Very good. Very good. Very good. And for those of you who are watching, for those of you who will be watching, we definitely need to develop some sort of maybe a community review board whereby we flesh that out some more, whereby police officers police other police officers. I mean, they talk about some sort of a blue line, a blue veil, whereby they cover for each other. But nowadays with cell phones, we can pretty much see what's going on. And by the way, does a police officer have the right to say, turn off your camera to a citizen, to a bystander?
Someone who's just standing around filming? Yeah. No, I don't think so. I mean, they haven't committed any crime. Why should they turn their camera off?
Right. So they cannot order them to turn off the camera, because some people make the argument, say, well, if the police officer is really insistent on that, then maybe you can get in trouble as well. You can wind up escalating the situation. You can wind up getting arrested if you just keep on filming him or her when he or she does not want to be filmed.
I mean, again, it depends on what perspective I'm answering the question from. But
From the public's.
Legally, as long as you're not obstructing their work or obstructing their investigation or whatever it is, where they can't charge you with obstruction without violence. Or, you see, a lot of times you see these charges and they're make-up charges, that the police officer was looking for something to charge the person with. So a lot of times those are the charges that you see. But as long as you're not in the middle of the action, hey, if a police officer is conducting an arrest and maybe if you don't know whether it's legal or not, regardless of whether you know or not, you don't have the right to go get inside the action and do a video that way, obviously. But if you're standing off to the side and his only issue is that he doesn't want whatever he's doing captured on video, he doesn't have a right to tell you to turn off your camera as long as you're not interfering with what he's doing, or she's doing. To me, it's not something that, should happen. Now, in terms of, if you're asking me from the perspective of, what's smart to do, again, listen, I understand people have rights. I've been in that situation before. I've dealt with it myself as well, but I mean, it pains me to see somebody lose their life in a situation where maybe, they didn't have to lose their life. And it doesn't mean that I'm suggesting that you shouldn't stand up for your rights. So that's not what I'm saying either. You have to assess the situation that you're in, to figure out the best course of action to take. So every situation is a little bit different. I guess I can say I have no universal answer to give, but again, if I had a son, and I was giving this advice to my son, one of my primary concerns would be my son's life, because the most important right that any of us have is the right to live. That's the most important right, Any of the other rights, as far as I'm concerned, are more secondary. Doesn't mean that you ignore those, because people have given their lives in the name of, various things, in wars and other, things that happen in life. So again, there is a limit that a person can be pushed to, but from the perspective of what do I think, might be smart for a person to do, depending on the situation, is, doing what's necessary to make sure that you get to go home to your children as a Black man, that you get to go home to your mother. Those type of things are important. With that being said, agitation is still important, because a lot of the rights that we have now, we wouldn't have if people didn't march back in the day, if people didn't sit at counters back in the day, if people didn't engage in freedom rides, whatever it is that, people did to move the needle, those things still need to be done as well. So there's a balance there. So there's really no, hey, I can tell you there's a one answer that fits every situation. It kind of depends.
You mentioned the Freedom March, and this is, again, a loaded personal question. And I have to be honest with you, I'm just not always professionally and intellectually composed as you are. And, that's a sign of a professional. I still have not been able to watch George Floyd's video. Do you feel that we're moving forward? Are we making progress? I mean, there have been 3, 4, 5 men of color who's been lynched in 2020. It's like 2 steps forward and 4 steps back.
Okay. Do I think we've made progress? All of that is relative, obviously. I mean, if you're measuring whether or not you've gotten from a certain point, you got to look at where you came from, So in that sense, I think I'll be disingenuous to say there hasn't been some progress. I mean, there's no, colored fountains, or there's not the kind of thing that happened in Greenwood. I mean, those type of things don't happen as blatantly. Racism, to a certain extent, is still very overt at times, but a lot of times it's not as obvious. People give different justifications for why they did what they did, but have we come far enough? Absolutely not. I don't think we are where we can call ourselves a colorblind society. I don't think we are where people have the same rights and can exercise the same freedoms that some people have. You know, the answer to that question is obviously no. We have a long way to go. You know, I am encouraged with some of what I've seen going on lately in terms of the marching that's been going on and just the persistent nature of it. It's not, you know, hey, we're gonna complain about certain things happening or march about some things that are going wrong in society and do it for a week and then we're back at home. This thing has been sustained. So that in itself, even through COVID, people are out risking their lives so that you know that they believe in something. That to me is encouraging. The makeup of the crowd that is out there protesting as well is also
a silver lining, a silver lining, a silver lining. White people are telling white people that Black Lives Matter.
exactly, you know. And again, we can't change society by ourselves.
Right.
We kind of
Right. I should not. I've been saying this, and I'm glad that you said this. I'm glad that you're echoing that. I've been saying this. I should not be the only person responsible for my safety. I'm responsible for your safety. You're responsible for my safety. I'm responsible for my community's safety, and vice versa. We are all responsible for each other's safety. I've been saying that, and I thank you very much for echoing that. Because even though I'm educated, I'm an educator. I'm a parent. I'm a husband. Sometimes it's hard for me to maintain my composure. Sometimes it's very hard for me to maintain my composure when it comes to these issues, because I just feel at any moment I can be George Floyd. I can be George Floyd.
The reality is that's true. No matter who you are, no matter what you've accomplished in life, no matter where you are. I mean, there are people getting shot in their own homes. I mean, where does a person feel the most safe? There's nowhere you can go really where this can't touch you. So of course, you know, I mean, who you've become, what you've achieved, none of those things are going to trump how somebody who doesn't know you sees you. You know, because initially when they see you, what they see is what's on the outside, unfortunately. That's how, you know, a lot of situations, I guess escalate and turn into something that really it shouldn't be. And, you know, listen, police officers every day somehow learn how to or are able to de-escalate situations that involve people that are not people of color. You know, so if you have those tools and you have those skills already, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to apply that across the board. You know, but I mean, to go back to your question, I want to make something clear. I don't believe in looking at the situation that you presented to me before, the video that you showed me. You know, I'm of two minds about it, and that's kind of what I tried to explain initially. There's the rights that you have, which I think, you know, you should fight for, and those rights are out there, and you know, you have the right to do certain things, and I'm not taking away from that. You know, you have the right to exist, you have the right to be free from harassment. All those things are rights that, you know, you should advocate for. You know, but with that being said, I also understand the reality of the situation that sometimes you're confronted with. You know, it doesn't make what the officer is doing any better. It doesn't make it any more right. And it's no way an excuse for what's happening. I don't want to make that seem like that's the case, you know, but again, you kind of have to balance certain factors and, you know, try to make the best choice for that particular moment that you're in, you know. But if you don't mind, if I can touch on what I was talking about before in terms of, you know, where do we go from here? What's the silver lining? You know, what I hope happens from what's happening, you know, the protests and the marching and some of the things that are going on right now that's shedding light on, you know, what's been going on for, you know, what seems like an infinite amount of time, is that Black or people of color, however you want to classify us, we need to do what we can in our community as well to kind of seize the mantle. And I'm not just talking about in terms of protesting, but also running for office, making sure we register to vote. I mean,
absolutely, absolutely. Get a seat at the table. Absolutely, absolutely.
Exactly. And then the economic piece, which oftentimes isn't, you know, to me, discussed as much. I mean, the buying power we have as a community, you know, in of itself can make a difference. Money talks, you know? So if we could become a little bit more cohesive,
self-sufficient, self-sustaining.
start our own businesses, do things to help build up the community. Because if you start a business, then maybe you don't have to worry about the kids around the block not having somewhere to work, because you can give them opportunities they may not get in other places. Now, of course, you want to advocate for getting, a seat at the table in corporate America, or a seat at the table in places that are not predominantly African American, but you also want to kind of develop some things in your own communities, and you want to support the businesses that are in your own communities. One of the things that I love doing is going back to the schools and talking to the kids, especially some of the schools where people stop, where it's kind of like your last stop because you've gotten in trouble everywhere else they've sent you. Those are the schools sometimes I will go to and talk to the kids, because I want to make sure they understand that not just Black Lives Matter, but they matter.
That's right.
What they do makes a difference, because if they can turn their lives around, they could be the person that gives the next person an opportunity, and shows them, hey, you can go from a situation that's not that good to a situation where, you have made a difference for yourself, have made a difference for your family members, have made a difference for your community, and have made a difference for the people that look like you. Unfortunately, that's kind of the way things are. So I just would like to see us do more to develop the economic buying power in our community and spend it more with each other to build up our community so we can get a better seat at the table.
Well, that's music to my ears, because that's how I opened up the Broward Social Network. The Broward Social Network is essentially a mentoring company, and I actually barter social media visibility with companies to mentor my students. So I will definitely love to have that conversation with you at some later date, because I do believe the power of words, the power of influence, the power of exposure, the power of an environment. And it's this video in itself. It's going to be played hundreds and thousands. It's going to be seen by hundreds and thousands of people. And who knows, maybe there's a word that's going to inspire somebody to make different decisions, to make better decisions, and consequently save their lives. So I am a firm believer in that, and we can definitely work on that together.
Yeah, one of the things I had too is
Continue.
the power of example.
Absolutely, absolutely. Which is why I invite folks like yourself on this platform to be seen by others, because the power of social media will outdo radio, will outdo television any day, because after they interview you, they're going to move on to the next story. But I do what's called targeted social media, and I will show you the example, Samuel Yeboah, to the community, and hopefully inspire them to follow suit, because I would like to see more Samuel Yeboahs than Rashad Brooks or George Floyd, of course. Okay, so from within, as an experienced attorney, you deal with cases of discrimination, because all of this falls under the umbrella of discrimination as far as I'm concerned. From within, are you seeing increasing receptivity from the courts? Because if you bring in a case to the courts, and you have to be able to prove to the judge that this is a clear case of discrimination, they're breaking the law, there could be a time when the judge could say, hey, I don't think you were discriminated. I just didn't want to make a cake for this couple. That's not discrimination. Is there increasing receptivity from within the judicial system?
That's a really good question. And my answer to that question is I don't know yet. And let me tell you why I say that, because remember this George Floyd thing that seemed, this incident that involved George Floyd that seems like a tipping point, since that happened, the courts have been closed to a certain extent. I mean, yeah, they're still having hearings. You can do certain things by, Zoom or have conferences, telephone hearings. But in terms of going in front of a court with an actual case and trying a case in front of a jury, I have not had the opportunity. I've not walked into a courtroom since this thing occurred.
Okay, but historically, looking at cases of discrimination, in general, are the courts increasingly being able to recognize discrimination, or are they indifferent, or are they saying that, this is not discrimination? Because there, like you said, is gray. Some people may say there's some area of subjectivity when it comes to discrimination.
Yeah, honestly, I don't have enough, data to really be able to say whether or not, they're more receptive than they were, in January of this year. You know, one thing I can tell you is that there's a lot of people, and unfortunately, the court system, you know, hasn't historically been friendly to Black people to start with. I'm just being upfront with you. I'm a lawyer. I've seen it. You know, so that
Can you give
doesn't.
us can you give us an example?
Well, just in terms of sentences, you know, I mean, there's statistics out there that you could pull at any point in time to see what type of sentences minorities get versus what type of sentences, you know, people in the majority get. You know, if you compare a white person that stole a loaf of bread versus a Black person that did the same thing, and you go across the courts and see what type of sentences different people are getting, you know, historically the sentences have been more harsher for Black people than they have been for white folks.
I'm glad you said that, because today's Thursday, and Tuesday and Wednesday, I have nearly 9,000 people participating on my platform, increasing on a daily basis. And I've had two gentlemen who don't look like you or I, and they told me that there's no such thing as white privilege. So trying to remain calm, and if I were to share with them these statistics, their response would be, well, you know what, if you don't work hard, if you don't do the right things in life, then you're going to end up where you are. I've even had somebody say right here on this platform that George Floyd is the cause of his own death. So I do believe that we are responsible for our actions. I do believe that. However, I am also well aware of what you're talking about, and some people question it in terms of how folks are treated in the judicial system.
Yeah, I mean, listen, sometimes you have some people that don't see certain things, but I think, and this is just my personal opinion, but in some situations that ignorance is willful. They don't want to believe certain things, you know, because that disrupts their worldview of how things are, you know, and sometimes some conversations are very uncomfortable for certain people to have, you know, depending on the person, obviously. But I mean, the evidence is abundant if you're willing to go out there and look for it. It doesn't take a whole lot, you know, just a few Google clicks. You can look at statistics, you know, state by state if you want to. I mean, you can't argue. And I know some people say you can make numbers say whatever it is that you want it to say, but when you adjust for the fact that what are we, like 10% of the population, 13% of the population?
13%.
And look at how more frequently, like look at stop and frisk, for example, in New York. You know?
Right.
How more frequently, when that law was enacted, they were stopping people in certain communities. You know, I mean, right there in black and white, you know? So, I mean, you can't argue with the facts.
Right.
You know, but I mean, people like that say what they've told. I mean, I don't want to get into, you know, what motivates a person that I don't know, obviously that I've never met. That just tells me you're either ignorant, you're misinformed, or you just don't care, or some combination of those things, you know.
And many times we are a product of our environment, of our parents, and the lens by which is what you're saying in different words, the lens by which you look at the world, you're not able to see the objectivity. You know, the lens gives them a subjectivity of we are all equal from their point of view. And, you know, if you want to be wealthy or live in a good neighborhood, you're able to do that. Meanwhile, there are still today data whereby there are certain zip codes where people like me are not welcomed. So, and that's just, like you said, black and white. So I'm looking at the time, and I value your time, and you've said it many times, but I'm going to ask you to close with this, and then also let the public know how they can reach you in case they wanted to be able to access your expertise and had some questions. Talk to us about how we should conduct ourselves in the community. Talk to the young people about how to get home safely, and try not to get killed out there, because it's very real. It is very real. After George Floyd, we thought the whole world woke up. The whole world was marching. We thought that probably would have been the last time. But then we had Rayshard Brooks. We've had others as well. So talk to us as to how you would specifically recommend that we make it home safe when it comes to interacting with the police, because at the end of the day, that's really what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's part of the reason I started with that, not to blame the victim or anything along those lines, you know. but it's just, again, it just, it hurts to see this time and time again on TV, even though I don't know the families that are going through that. But when somebody dies, it's not something abstract. There are people that were at home waiting for that person to come home, that would never see them again, that would never get the guidance of that person or the love of that person or the society, whatever it is that that person meant to them. So again, if there is any way that and I'm trying to give you general principles and not say, hey, you should act this way in this particular situation, because I'm not in that situation. Was it in the daytime? Is there people around? I mean, they may be less likely to do something to you in that situation versus is it at night? Is it just you and whoever that you're dealing with? I mean, I don't know if you heard about this thing that happened in North Carolina with these Wilmington cops that were recorded. Apparently, this is somewhere in Wilmington, North Carolina, where there were some cops that have been either fired or suspended that were talking. They got caught. I don't know how you get caught on a recording on your own car, but they were talking about the N-word and how they should just go out and just start slaughtering black people and some other stuff, just some really outrageous stuff. That if you talk to people about it, some folks would be like, well, why would the police ever do X or why would the police ever do that? And again, I'm not impugning all officers. That's not what I'm saying.
Right. It's important to make that. It's important to make that statement that most police officers are good representation of law enforcement, fortunately. And I do believe that we are talking about just a few bad apples, which make a big impact. However, I do want to make it clear here on my platform, the Broad Social Network is not saying that all law enforcement are bad. I personally have never really I've been stopped by the police for speeding. I've been given tickets, but I've never had a bad encounter with the police ever. I was more afraid of my mother than I was afraid of the police. So because my mother was like, I will not take you out of jail. If you find yourself in jail, I will leave you there. So I was more afraid of my mom than I was afraid of the police. So yes, that's a very good point to make, and I do appreciate that. So
yeah, but I mean, to answer your question, which I really didn't finish answering, I think, to the extent that you can, there's anything you can do on your own and to de-escalate the situation, especially when you're confronted with someone who's looking to do something they probably shouldn't do. If there's anything you can do to de-escalate the situation, then I would invite you to do that to make sure you make it home, or to increase the chances. Some things you're not going to make it home from. It is what it is, especially if you encounter some of these officers that were caught on this tape. They already had something in mind when they were going out. But to the extent that you can do anything to de-escalate the situation and not agitate, or inflame the situation, I think that would be helpful.
Speaking of de-escalating, this is rather personal. So I'm going to give you a scenario. So you're driving your nice car and a police officer says, black guy driving a nice car in this neighborhood, and they approach you and they ask you for your ID. Do you tell them that you're an attorney, or do you just wait and see what happens? I'm curious, because I would be the type of person to just not say anything and just wait and just drop the bomb on them afterwards. Do they, and if you do tell them, do they, oh, please excuse me, do they behave differently?
It depends on the situation. I've handled it both ways, and unfortunately for me right now, well, not say unfortunately, but again, I've handled it in both ways. So it just depends on the circumstance, So, but I've also talked to other friends I know that are attorneys that, happen to be black as well, that have, just not said anything. And there's one story I can tell you. This conversation happened last week with a female attorney that I know that was a public defender for a while. She got stopped by the police and in a situation where she thought it was just unjustified, never told the officer that she was an attorney, showed up in court and the officer was there. And as soon as she walked into court, everybody in court, the judge and just different, attorneys that were in court was saying, hey, Janet, how you doing? Well, now I'm saying her name, but she's telling me, hey, how you doing? And then the officer saw that, based on the story she told me, basically the officer, when they asked her, she was like, well, I mean, I don't really care about the ticket, and the officer left, because she assessed her based on the way she was dressed that day. She didn't have a suit on, wasn't dressed in, talking a certain way or whatever. So she was just really surprised. She said this lady's eyes got so big just based on the love that she was getting even from the judge, because they knew her. They all knew her. So it's, but yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, I've handled it in both ways, and it just kind of depends on the situation. Again, I said there's no one size fits all. So I kind of evaluate the situation I'm in, and how I'm feeling that day also has an impact. And
do you then, and we're about to close, but do you then drop the hammer on them? Do you then let them know that they're wrong? Do you have a conversation with them? Does that become a teachable moment?
Again, it depends on the officer. Some folks, it would have an impact on. Believe it or not, some folks, and I hate to say it this way, is I've met people in my life that didn't, I wouldn't say didn't have a problem with the color of your skin. They had a problem with the color of your skin plus achievement. It made them feel a certain way, so it can cut both ways.
They have a problem with the color of your skin plus the achievement. So that's, wow. So that's kind of like what young people would say, they're hating on you. Like, how dare you be a lawyer? How dare you be successful?
Well, I mean, some people, and again, it depends on who you're dealing with, but I've encountered that in my life, where you deal with folks that, don't mind certain things. And just think about the brutality with Black people, especially in the South, after, the emancipation, and then you had Reconstruction, and then you had, these Jim Crow laws and some of the things, some of the brutality to me, and again, I wasn't there, obviously, I can compare certain things, but some people had trouble with the fact that people were free, and that agitated some folks, so it's, to me, the same line of thinking. It's nothing different, it may take a different character, they're not necessarily doing a lynching or hanging you from a tree as, in the same ways or in the same frequency that was happening once upon a time, but yeah, some people had a problem with the fact that Blacks were free at the time, so to me, it's a continuation of the same type of thought process.
To the best of your, thank you, sorry for interrupting. To the best of your knowledge, are African-American men, and you may not, if you don't know this, it's okay, because I'm curious how Black men in different parts of the world, are they experiencing the same challenges? Because I believe you're from Ghana, correct?
Yeah, I was born in Ghana, West Africa, yeah.
And to the best of your knowledge, are Black men in maybe Ghana experiencing the same thing as in here in America? Are there the same challenges?
As far as life challenges, you're going to have similar things. Obviously, you want to make a living for yourself, but from the perspective of, being singled out and treated a certain way because of the color of your skin, no, because the power structure there is Black.
Okay.
The government doesn't mean that the government is perfect. That's not what I'm suggesting.
Right.
If somebody mistreats you, it's more likely because they don't like you. It's not a matter of what you are or what you look like or the fact that your skin is a certain color, because Black people run the government there. So it's very different. But I mean, me personally, I've noticed a difference in the race issue, depending on what countries you go to, like even from here to Europe, certain countries, it's different. I know that because I've experienced it myself, and I'm not, not saying that racism doesn't exist in other countries in Europe, depending on where you go, obviously. In some places, the attitude and the experience you have is a little bit different. Let me just put it that way. And I'll just leave it at that. And I know that I've traveled quite a bit. So every country is going to be unique. Every country is going to have its own separate challenges. But one thing I can tell you is it's not 100% the same everywhere you go. Right. It's a little bit different, So.
Well, having said that, I'd love a closing statement. And then also I'd like for you to share with the public, the platform. We have a few folks watching. Commissioner Denise Grant of Lauderhill is with us. Welcome, Commissioner Grant. Thank you for joining us, along with the other participants and observers. Give us a closing statement with regards to community and public relationships. And what's more important, and I always look at this as an angle of an educator, because my students will probably be given the opportunity to watch this video and do an extra credit paper on this conversation. I also do want to talk about self-conduct, which you've talked about, right? Because you are going to be treated based on how you behave. So I can't change my skin color. I wouldn't want to do that, but I do have control as to how I conduct myself, and I will be treated according to how I conduct myself. And then we can share with us how the public can reach you.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, again, I'm a big believer in, doing what you can do to change your circumstances. Nobody's perfect. Nothing's going to be done completely right all the time. But I think where a lot of things start with, to me, is education. That's one of the things my parents always stressed, And I know in the neighborhoods I grew up in, sometimes I saw people that didn't get the same guidance that I got when I was at home, or my family members got, the kids got.
Mhm.
But education, to me, is one of the great equalizers. And when I say education, I'm not just saying getting it in school. That's not the only way to get education. That's part of it. Certainly, I think that's important. You need that base. But self-learning, whether it be a trade, whether it's getting into, becoming a lawyer, whatever it is that you want to do in life, I think the more you know, the better situated you are.
Absolutely.
To make a difference for yourself. So that's one, education. The other thing, as far as our community specifically, is I think it is really, really important that we do more, to build an economic base in our community. I think having a few rich people or whatever, to me, is not sufficient. We need, and people who make it out of the community need to go back into the community, to do more to help other people build and, hopefully make it out of the community. Because the more that the whole community rises, I think the more respect you're going to get, and the better seat at the table you're going to get, Because listen, corporate America talking about, Nike and, McDonald's and all these people that are coming out with statements about Black Lives Matter is not just because of the morals of it. I think that's part of it, but it's also because of the economics of it.
Absolutely. Well said. Well said. Well said.
Yeah.
You have to tell me about your schedule, because I can talk to you for a while, because you're talking about building our community economically, which I believe in. However, if I build my Black community and they build their white community, are we approaching segregation again?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I mean, I don't see the two as mutually exclusive.
Right.
Because again, I think we have a responsibility to us as well to help elevate and put us in a better position in the society that we exist in. And to a certain extent, the best way to do that is going to be to support each other. Right. It doesn't necessarily mean to the exclusion of other folks,
Right.
I have different types of people that work for me. I don't just hire just specific, but I also understand that certain communities don't get the same opportunity. So when I'm in a position to give them that opportunity, I give them that opportunity, because that person may not get it somewhere else. So I have an obligation. I can't just say I've gotten to a certain level in society, wherever that may be for you, and that, at this point, I'm just going to do things in a colorblind fashion and not do anything to assist my community, when I know my community, whether it be COVID, whether it be whatever, there's a need there. In healthcare, we don't get the same quality healthcare in the community that other communities get. It's just the disparity cuts across different areas of life. And to me, it doesn't make any sense not to address that. If we're not going to address it, who else should?
Exactly.
Exactly. So it's not about segregation, and it's not about, again, doing things just with ourselves, but I think we need to do more to help build up your community as well. You have a responsibility, as far as I'm concerned. I have that responsibility. Everybody does.
Yes, we all do. So do I. And but trying to be mindful of the time, we did not talk about the elephant in the room. How has COVID-19 impacted your practice?
My office was closed. I think we closed in the middle of March, and we were closed until June 1st when we reopened. And, we worked for a little while, and then I shut the office down again on Friday of last week because of the uptick in cases. It's good to have business and, do the things that we need to do to develop our company or our, my law practice, but I also care about the health of my people. That's always primary. So yeah, it's affected us. It certainly has affected us, but fortunately for me, I can't say that it's impacted me to the extent that it's impacted someone who owns a restaurant,
Mhm.
that had to shut down. And even when they reopen, the margins, I suspect, are not that high in these restaurant businesses anyway. And now you have, a third of the capacity in some of the restaurants that I walk by in South Beach, for example, which is where I live right now. I mean, it's not a whole lot of people sitting, so I mean, again, everything is relative. So we're not to that extent. So I think we're good. We're going to be okay. There has been an impact in the way we do things, but it hasn't really been an impact in our ability to generate revenue as much as other companies.
Are you doing teleconsultations?
Yeah, we do that. I've signed some people up remotely because some folks, I mean, I prefer the personal touch to sit down and talk to you, so who's representing you. I think that makes a huge difference. But yeah, we talk to people on the computer, Zoom or whatever other options there are. We also do a lot of telephone calls, conferences, those type of things. So again, our business has still been able to pretty much chug along, with some challenges here and there, but for the most part, we've been okay. So I can't complain.
Thank you so much. Well, there you have it, social media land. Mr. Samuel Yeboah, attorney in Fort Lauderdale, South Florida, giving us his perspective on the current events and also talking about the impact of COVID-19 on his practice. And I'd like for you to share with the public how they can get in touch with you in the event that they would want to get in touch with you. And I also would like to extend an open invitation to you in the future if there are any topics you'd like to be able to discuss whereby thousands of people will be able to hear your message. You are welcome anytime. Just give me a call and let's just talk to the people. So how is it that the public can reach you?
Okay. On one condition, you promised me you're going to call me to talk to your students.
Oh,
It's a passion of mine. I would love to come in and speak.
Okay, first and foremost, I pay out of, I mean, you got me kind of worked up now. This is what I do. On top, I'm a chemistry and biology teacher. On top of teaching about the periodic table and parts of the cell, I realized a while ago that that's not enough for what the universe had placed into my classroom. So I take kids out and bring them into the community. If it weren't for COVID, I'd be asking you to prepare some sandwiches for some of my students because I work in a Title I school, because we have to feed them and spend a day with you so they can see what you do. Okay. And so when COVID came in, I thought that was the end. But guess what? I moved my operation online. I called a few professionals, and I've been virtually able to mentor or encourage and inspire my students through this platform as well. So if it's not going to happen in person, because I don't even know if we're going to go back into the classroom in the fall, it can definitely happen virtually, because I don't know why the universe decided to put John, Jane, and Jim in my classroom. However, they're not there just to learn science. I thought they were when I came into teaching. So it is a given. I would definitely gear them towards you, because even though you're not a brain surgeon or a doctor, as far as I'm concerned, you're still in the business of saving lives. Hearing your message, a young person will say, well, let me just reconsider how I conduct myself based on what Attorney Yeboah stated, and as a result, make it home alive. Absolutely, absolutely. that's my dream. Thank you so very much.
I'll tell your guests how to reach me. My office again is in Broward, but we practice in Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach. We even have cases in Key West. But I'm really easy to find. My name is Samuel Yeboah. You've already been told that a couple of times. I'll tell you that to say my phone number is 1-800-TEL-SAM. It's really easy to remember. So 1-800-TEL-SAM. If you want to call my office, that's the easiest way to reach me. Also, if you want to look us up online, you can also look us up at 1-800-TEL-SAM.com, either 800-TEL-SAM or 1-800-TEL-SAM.com. The actual website address is YeboahLawGroup.com, but the 1-800 fees to that website. If I tell people Yeboah, most people don't know how to spell it. So that's part of the reason why I use a 1-800 tell Sam as an email address to direct you to my site, but you can go to our site. You can learn about our practice. You can go to our social media. 1-800-TELL-SAM is also our Instagram. You can learn about the scholarships that we give annually to students across the country. It's called a Make a Difference Scholarship that I started some years back, where we give it to students that are not only succeeding academically, but they have a vision. They have to explain to us what the vision is in terms of what they're going to do with whatever degree or whatever education they get. And there's some of the other charitable things that we do in the community. I think that's really, really important to give back. It doesn't matter how much money you make if it's just you're not doing anything to help out the community, whether it be your community or the community at large. It's not limited to just minorities in terms of what we do. We have an annual turkey giveaway. We had a car seat giveaway and education thing that we did with Commissioner Grant. Fortunately, she helped us do that. And
thank you, Commissioner Grant. Thank you.
Mayor Hazel Rogers kind of helped with that as well.
Oh, so, another wonderful leader. Wonderful, wonderful. I think she was in here at some point. She does know about this interview. I don't know if she agrees, but I consider her to be one of my mentors. Absolutely. Wonderful.
She's a lot of people's mentors. I've heard a lot of good things about her from, and just other people. And I don't want to leave people out, like, Mayor Messam,
yes.
The longest table thing that he did. He's very involved in the community. Dale Honus. I mean, there's just other people that I've met. I've been, who's a current mayor of Broward County, but I've just had the fortune of, being able to mingle with certain people and join them in what they're doing as well for the community. You know what I'm saying? It just, to me, is really, really important. If I could do this full time, I probably would, as far as just, outside of the law stuff, just being able to do things to give back. I think it's rewarding in a way that you don't expect until you start to do it.
May I ask you how many scholarships you give out and by how much?
Yeah,
if you don't mind.
I don't want to get into the figures with that, but
is it just one? Is it just one?
Yeah, right now we're giving out one scholarship a year, but we're starting a foundation. One of the attorneys that works with me specializes in complex business litigation, and we're putting together a foundation so we can, raise more money and make more of a difference. I've also given money to other people's scholarships, which I did last year. But we want to be able to expand. One person can only do so much. Right. To get to the point where we can raise money with some of the contacts that I've developed and be able to give more deserving students an opportunity.
Absolutely.
Somebody gave it to me. That's why I'm here now. So absolutely. Yeah. All right.
I cannot thank you enough. You've given me your most valuable asset, which is your time. And as I said, many, many people will repeatedly see this video. This will be rebroadcasted. This will be found on YouTube, on Twitter, on Periscope, on Twitch, and of course, Facebook, and also DLive. So I thank you so very much, Samuel Yeboah. You are definitely a gift to humanity. And I am just hoping that we can continue the good work that you're doing. And I invite you back anytime. I thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, social media land. Again, this is Thursday, June the 25th, and we're closing out this wonderful interview at approximately 8 p.m. with Samuel Yeboah, attorney in Florida. And for all of the participants who have seen and are seeing and will see this video, I thank you all very much. And tomorrow I will be interviewing Mr. Julian Placino, who is a motivational speaker. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, Friday morning at 10:30. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.